All right, and we are live. I am so excited today to have two of our powerhouses at Princeton Integrative Health here today. We have Jenna Richardson and Lee Yonish. Jenna is the co-founder of Princeton Integrative Health, as well as the Acton Academy Princeton. She's a certified functional medicine practitioner, as well as a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. And then we have Lee. She's our certified nutrition consultant here at Princeton Integrative Health. So today we're talking about food allergies and sensitivities and how it's an epidemic. Food allergies have increased in the US dramatically, especially in children over the past 20 years. We have 32 million people in the US that have food allergies. About 26 million of these are adults and 5.6 million of these are children. So I want to kick this session off by asking both Jenna and Lee this question. First, let's get Jenna's input. Why have food allergies and sensitivities reached epidemic proportions here in the US?
Yeah, great question, Regina. So at the heart of a lot of chronic challenges, health challenges and diseases, is the inflammatory response and the immune response. And it's my belief that a lot of this goes back to the fact that we live in an environment and are subject to a lot of toxicity that our bodies just can't keep up with. So obviously we have, major detoxification organs, our liver, our kidneys, our skin. So our bodies are built to detoxify and to remove, those toxins which we're exposed to. But part of the challenge is really since the Industrial Revolution and all of the chemical production. So everything that we're breathing in, that we're eating, that we're drinking in our water, it just is all accumulating in our system and in our body. And our body is just, evolution has not caught up with science. And so we just are not able to remove toxins as quickly and as effectively as we should be. That on top of, the rise in infections, bacterial infections, parasitic infections, the fact that we've lived in an environment that has frowned upon playing in the dirt and relished in antibacterial, products. Has really just, created an environment for our immune systems to become weakened and unable to keep up with the toxic burden that we're presented with on a daily basis.
Geez, that's frightening. So that really is scary. And thank you for sharing that. And Lee, what's your input? Why have food allergies and sensitivities reached epidemic proportions here in the US?
First of all, I want to apologize for my dog barking in the background. There's nothing I can do about it right now. So if anybody hears that, I'm so sorry. But I thought what Jenna just said was I completely agree, totally well put. And I mean, just sort of building off of that, there's this concept of total load, which is basically the sum of all stressors. And we are living in a world of stressors, and they come in lots of different forms, whether it's pesticides, plastics, food additives, GMOs, metals, emotional stress, and all of those things ultimately impact our nervous system and our gastrointestinal system. So I think what's going on is that our body systems are very compromised from all of these toxins, infections, etc. And it's like the tub is running over. We can't handle, certain foods because our GI tract is just completely overwhelmed.
Wow, it's absolutely fascinating. And Lee, so, this is your wheelhouse. You work with patients that come to you that have issues with their gut, food allergies, sensitivities. What do you find are the most common food allergies that you see when working with patients at Princeton Integrative Health? And what do the symptoms look like?
I think by far the most common sensitivity is to gluten. And since we're all biologically individual, that can manifest in a lot of different ways. Some people it's GI distress, just chronic, irritable bowel. Some people it's chronic headaches. Others it's joint pain. Sometimes it's fatigue and brain fog. It really can run the gamut, and that seems to be the most common issue we see.
Absolutely. And so many people suffer from these symptoms and they're not making that connection that it could be, what they're putting in their gut. So I want to shift over to Jenna. So Jenna, is it true that you can heal or reverse food allergies and sensitivities? You have personal experience with this, right?
Yeah, so I think it's something that we don't realize or recognize. I have a little bit of even though we do it in our practice, I have always struggled with the concept of food allergy, sensitivity, and intolerance testing, because the premise is that when someone eats something, if their gut is leaky, which is something we talk a lot about in foundational and functional medicine, leaky gut is when the barrier of your mucosal lining of your intestines breaks down and almost produces like small holes and gaps, so that food and bacteria and toxins and all of those things are now, rather than passing through the GI tract in the way that they're meant to, being absorbed, and the stuff that we don't absorb being excreted, there are little particles that are passing through our gastrointestinal tract and getting into our bloodstream and then circulating and causing this inflammatory response. So leaky gut is a big culprit of that oftentimes, but positive aspect is that we can heal leaky gut. So I've actually seen, whether it's IgG or IgA, and we can talk a little bit more about what those are. So IgG is a food sensitivity. IgA is also sensitivity. IgA indicates oftentimes damage to the mucosal lining. IgG is what I would call kind of a slow allergy. So it's some of the things Lee described. It's the brain fog when you eat, it's some of the gastrointestinal discomfort, it's joint pain, it's a skin reaction. It's not anaphylactic. When we think about an anaphylactic allergy, that's an IgE response. So I've always believed that we could resolve leaky gut and heal IgG and IgA. But what I'm actually learning and seeing with my own son is that his IgE allergies are resolving. So he's never been anaphylactic, fortunately, but he has had a host of issues around a heightened immune response to food and to other things. And we're actually seeing that reversed through the process of drainage and detoxification and, systemic immune healing, gut healing, kind of all of those things that we focus on in our roadmap to health process at Princeton Integrative Health.
Fascinating. And in terms of testing, could you speak a little bit about some of the testing that we offer that can give a patient insight into healing? I know, like for myself, for instance, I go to an unconventional doctor and I get a celiac disease test, but of course it comes back negative and they said it's fine, but I know that gluten absolutely bothers my stomach. So could you talk a little bit about some of the functional medicine testing that we offer?
Me? Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we do a lot of testing, and it's really just kind of about peeling back the onion. That's the way that I describe it. So if someone comes into the practice and they present with a host of issues, we'll run, conventional lab work, but conventional lab work really only kind of scratches the surface. It doesn't really tell you a lot about what's going on under the hood, which is really what we're driving at, because it's our belief that when you can get at the root cause, you can actually, promote, you can, what I call, coach that up and promote healing and restoration. So we do, run the gamut from testing the gut microbiome, so looking for pathogens, bacteria, viruses, other toxins that may exist in the gut, so that we can support the removal of those things and ultimately support the healing process. We do run some food sensitivity and intolerance testing. We look for things like, triggers like mold and mycotoxins, heavy metals, hormonal imbalances. So really a whole host of things, Lyme disease, testing and co-infection testing. So really a whole host of things. And, premise of functional medicine is that all disease starts in the gut. I do believe that, but I believe significantly in the gut-brain connection, because a lot of what goes on in the gut and through that digestive process is actually, initiated and supported by the brain. So it's just really important to identify what's going on beneath the surface so that we can work on removal, restoration, you know, and actually coach people back to health.
Amazing. And shifting back to Lee, so we talked about how this is your wheelhouse, Lee, and you work with a lot of patients that suffer from these issues. What does a healing journey, you know, for a patient look like with you and working with you? Is it just about like diet or eliminating foods or?
Yeah, I mean, so in functional medicine, there's a protocol called the 4Rs and the 4Rs stand for remove, replace, re-inoculate, and repair. So the first step is to remove what we believe are the triggers or, you know, the foods causing the reactions. Sometimes it's a sensitivity, sometimes it's an intolerance. And in that case, it means that perhaps enzymes are missing. So we'll replace digestive enzymes with those that we think, you know, are not present in the body for whatever reason, then re-inoculate with, to balance out the microbiome. So re-inoculate with probiotics and probiotic and prebiotic foods, and then repair the gut lining with, there's various supplements and ways to, you know, foods as well to help create more integrity in that mucosal lining. But another sort of in tandem with that would be an elimination diet, as you referenced. Mm-hmm. And typically, I mean, and this really is the gold standard for figuring out food sensitivities. And typically, there are some, you know, there are the top foods to eliminate: gluten, dairy, eggs, peanuts, sometimes tree nuts as well. Let's see, soy. And I'm just talking about sensitivities actually. And then sometimes there's citrus, some strawberries. I might be missing a few, but those are the big ones. And what you do is you remove them for at least a month, but actually could do up to 4 months, and then slowly reintroduce them one at a time, and just look for reactions there and record them. And then, you know, it is a long process, but by the time you sort of get through it, you have a lot of data and you pretty much know what you can, you know, continue to eat, what you need to try to continue to avoid, and maybe try again to reintroduce later. So you just have a lot of information. So that's, you know, one big way of working through this.
Yeah, and like you said, it can be a long process and it's complicated. So it's great to know that, you know, someone would have support with someone like yourself with this process, because there's so many different moving pieces. So now I want to ask Jenna. So we discussed this a few weeks ago. Jenna, can you shed light on the parasitic connection and food allergies? I thought it was blew my mind when you said 98% of people have parasites and they don't know it. And some of them are good, some of them are bad.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about what we've been exposed to over the course of our lifetimes, you know, we're constantly in contact with nature and with the earth, and with pets who are out in contact with nature and the earth. So, you know, we live in a very symbiotic environment where we're subject to, you know, relationships with other types of organisms. One of those, or many of those, are parasites or worms mostly, and we don't have a lot of great testing to show, you know, exposure to worms, and or if we have a challenge with worms in our system. So a more recent statistic that I heard is that 96% of people living in the United States have some form of parasite in their body, and that's, I think, previously would have been believed for perhaps underdeveloped countries, but not for the United States. But it's becoming much more recognized even in some of the conventional literature. And there are a lot of these parasites that actually can hang out in your body, in your systems, in your tissue, in your brain, in your gastrointestinal tract, because you are their host. So they're feeding off of what, you know, you're eating, which can cause a lot of challenges digestively. It can cause brain fog. It can cause, you know, a whole host of the things that we had mentioned earlier as being symptomatic of allergies and intolerances. But it's really about, when we talk about peeling back the onion, it's not just about the identification of the root cause, which sometimes we have to make assumptions about because you can't test for everything. And as I said, some of the testing is inaccurate. But parasites feed off of toxins. So it's multidimensional. You have toxins, you have the parasites that feed off of toxins, you have the bacteria and the viruses that actually can be harbored in the parasite. So even if you're going directly after the viruses or the bacteria, with any type of like herbal or even, pharmaceutical medication, a lot of times you can't get at them because it's actually they're living in the parasites. So as long as the parasites remain in your body, you're going to continue to have challenges. So we've really started focusing on a phased approach to remove not just one toxin, but all of them through a really kind of phased and gradual approach to healing and well-being, which we call the roadmap to health. So, their nematodes are a big category of parasites that are just absolutely pervasive. I went down this rabbit hole when my daughter, who at the time was 2 or 3, came home, and we found out that she had picked up threadworm or pinworm, which I had never heard of before, but apparently is much more prevalent in young kids than lice. So and oftentimes we don't even know that our children or ourselves at that age had it, but kids are out playing in the dirt and they're getting dirty and they're not washing their hands, and they're, I hate to say it, but anyone who has kids knows, they go to the bathroom and it's like pulling teeth to get them to wash their hands. So it's, and I even know adults who do this. It's pretty gross. And we have pets, like my dog's sleeping right here. I know, Lee, your dog was barking away earlier. So we love them and they're part of our family and they sleep in our beds but my dog goes out and we have a whole bunch of critters living in our yard, rabbits hopping around. They're, he's eating the little poop pellets. And so, we're exposed on a regular basis. And I think one of the things that even the functional medicine world has been missing for a very long time has been the aspect that we have these parasites that are just hanging out and doing their thing and living off of our bodies, but also that are causing for some people, critical health challenges, long-term health challenges.
This is so informative, and I didn't even think about that, had that parasitic connection. So absolutely fascinating. All right, so I feel like we covered a lot of information. Do Jenna or Lee, do you have any additional comments about this topic? I'm going to check to see if we have any questions on our page. Any comments from people?
I just wanted to say one thing about leaky gut or intestinal permeability, and I just want to mention that it is a little tricky because especially with gluten, sometimes there's like a chicken and egg scenario with this. Sometimes we do really have a sensitivity to gluten for whatever reason, and it ends up causing gut inflammation, and then the tight junctions in the small intestine open up and we have leaky gut. But sometimes we have leaky gut for other reasons, and then it ends up inducing a gluten sensitivity. So it's different for every person, but it's hard to pinpoint what sort of the origin or what was the initial problem. But I do want to just mention that these are complicated topics, and there is a little bit of trial and error. Everybody's a little bit different. It's not simple.
Yeah, I think one thing to add to that too, Lee, is gluten or wheat. So gluten is the protein of wheat for people who don't know that. The way our agricultural practices are nowadays, it becomes a real challenge, right? So I one of the things I've always been curious about, and I'm not sure, I haven't done a deep dive on this, but I'd have to venture to guess that the pesticides and herbicides and all of that are being sprayed on these crops are contributing. When you think about how pesticides work, the mechanism of action is actually that the pesticides get into the bug, and it explodes their gut. So, I know that we talk a lot about gluten and wheat sensitivities and tolerances. I mean, in my opinion, I don't know anybody who probably doesn't have a sensitivity or a tolerance to gluten. They may not know it because, as you described in the elimination diet, oftentimes we have to remove the noise to recognize that we were feeling bad because we didn't realize that we were feeling bad, and we felt so much better. But, you just think about agricultural practices, and even if you're eating organic, the things that are being sprayed into the air on crops. You have an agricultural crop that's not organic grown to next to one that is organic, and the stuff's being sprayed and it's blowing around. So even if you're organic, and I've seen this, many studies have been done on like, children's cereals and other food products, that even with the organic based products, there are still massive amounts of pesticides and things showing up in those products. So, we talk about the sensitivities and intolerances to things like gluten and dairy and various corn and various other agricultural products. But I think that, again, it's kind of like, what's really happening here, right? Is it the toxicity of the glyphosate and all these other things that are being utilized, or is it the wheat or the gluten itself? All that to say, my recommendation is always that most people should stay away from eating gluten. Obviously, every now and again, some people who don't have massive responses or symptoms around that, can cheat, if you will. But for the most part, what we're finding is that gluten tends to be the culprit in kind of in breaking down to the gut lining, to your point, and causing things like gastrointestinal permeability.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think that the wheat molecule has been denatured through our modern agricultural processing. And so our body just doesn't recognize it anymore. It's a foreign substance to our body. And I think that you're exactly right. I think it is the modern processing of it for sure. A lot of times people say that they go to Europe and they can actually eat the bread there. And so that's exactly why.
Yeah. And that just brings up another thought, which is this concept of something that occurs in our body called molecular mimicry, where sometimes it's not the food, but there are things going on in our body where our immune system is just so overwhelmed and inundated that it begins to produce a reaction against things that aren't actually the culprit.
Right.
So, I know, like, when I first tested my son for allergy sensitivities and intolerances, his test was lit up like a traffic light.
Mm-hmm.
And later, we found out that he had a whole bunch of other root causes or triggers going on that were causing the upregulation of the immune system. The immune system was indicating it was food-based, but it really wasn't food-based. So in things like allergies and asthma and even autoimmune conditions, oftentimes our body, and this happens with gluten, since we're on that topic, it recognizes that you're putting something foreign into your body, but it gets confused and it actually attacks like tissues and other organs and functions in your body, as opposed to actually going after the gluten. So I also think that's a really kind of interesting phenomenon, even though you think it's the food and the testing is showing you that you have all of these challenges with food. A lot of times it's just that there's other stuff going on below the surface and the body is totally confused.
Yeah, completely. I think peanuts are one of the best examples of molecular mimicry because peanuts tend to grow mold easily. And I think there's this new understanding that it's, peanut allergy, which is very common. My son has a pretty severe one. Is it's really the reaction, the first reaction, or the second exposure to it's exposure to mold, and then your body thinking that the peanut is mold, and just attacking that, even though it's not the peanut itself. So sorry, that was a long-winded way of saying, here's an example.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jenna and Lee, for sharing this valuable information with our viewers and our patients. And just to close this out, if you have the following symptoms, you may be a candidate for food sensitivity or allergy testing: gas, bloating, fever, fatigue, abdominal pain, constipation, diarrhea, headaches, brain fog, rashes such as eczema, nausea, vomiting, skin itchiness and redness, bronchitis, joint pain, and swelling.
And a big thing for kids, especially, Regina, is this inability to focus. So a lot of diagnostics around ADHD, ADD, hyperactivity, I know, like for my son, a lot of it was neurologic and behavioral. And so I just want to point that out. A lot of kids, because of the standard American diet and the crap that that we're consuming, are just in this state of noise, and they don't know how to get out of it. So I think that's oftentimes something that we don't think about: brain fog, inability to focus and concentrate, all of that stuff. And especially for our young people, I'm really passionate about that.
Absolutely. Thank you for adding that onto that list. So if you or a loved one suffer from any of these symptoms, please give our office a call at 609-512-1468. We offer a 30-minute complimentary discovery session. And just like Jenna and Lee said, this can be a complicated process, but we'll have the support of our practitioners like Lee throughout this process. So,
Can I add one more thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to say that oftentimes when we work with people who have excess weight and really come in wanting to lose the extra weight, one of the things that has to be checked off the list is food sensitivities, because if you're in a constant state of heightened immune response and chronic inflammation as a result of that, then you're not going to really have success in losing the weight. So addressing food sensitivities is one of the first things that we would do in that case. And it's not intuitive. I don't think people who are looking to lose weight, I don't think it really crosses their mind that food sensitivities might be a part of that bigger picture, but it really is. So I just wanted to mention that because this applies to a lot of people. And
you maybe even be eating things that would traditionally be labeled healthy.
Yes.
An immune response, which is causing the inflammation and the inability to remove weight, or any of these other challenges that we've talked about. So, you mentioned strawberries as being an allergen. I've known people who've thought that they were doing the best thing, for their bodies by eating eggs every single morning. And it turns out they had a sensitivity or intolerance, and it was just causing them to retain water and bloat because of the inflammation. So yeah, even the foods that we would think, where we think we're doing the right thing, may not be right for us because of bioindividuality. So you have to really figure out what works for you. And oftentimes that is, through a process of trial and error and elimination and peeling back the onion, as I continue to say.
Yep.
Let us help you peel back the layers of this complicated onion and get you started on your gut healing journey. So. All right, we have the powerhouses on today. So really happy about that. Thank you, Jenna and Lee. And tune in next time for our next Facebook Live, which will be on Thursday with Dr. Leonti.
Thank you, Regina.
All right, thank you.